everyone. So my name is Karina Corbin. I'm also a senior at Amherst College, like Catherine. I study computer science and Asian languages and civilizations. Outside of English, I've also studied Spanish, Chinese, Mandarin, and what I'm going to talk about today, Korean. And so it's interesting. My first introduction to Korean was my freshman year, and not in a course, but actually in the Korean Student Association. And so I joined on a whim. Two non Korean friends said, we should join this. And we decided to. And I started to make a lot of Korean speaking friends. And as we bonded, they taught me more and more Korean words, and we would use it in banter and conversations. And so my sophomore year, I was nominated to be the secretary of the KSA. And so now that I had this responsibility and started to become the face of the organization, I realized I couldn't just go around speaking in slang. I needed to figure out how to really articulate my sentences and, use grammar. And so I started taking a course at UMass to learn Korean, and I really, really enjoyed it. The class was really interactive, and I got to make a lot of friends and became really close with the students in my class. And so, because I started to feel more comfortable speaking Korean, I then became the vice president of the KSA. And so now I really needed to speak Korean very well. And so, not only did I need to speak it in terms of like connecting with members, but also for the administration. A lot of times we would have events called like Hotak Day, and Hotak is a Korean pancake. But Pancake Day as a translation doesn't do well for funding. But if you explain that, yes, this is actually like a cultural food that people eat at home during the winter and that, they connect with their grandmothers, it's a lot easier to explain why we needed $100 for this kind of event. So one meaningful experience of learning Korean actually came when I went home. So like Kenny, my family's from the Caribbean. And so when my grandmother came to the United States, she didn't have many friends. And so her first friend was actually the owner of a Korean grocery store that sold a lot of the vegetables that she had in the Caribbean. And so her first friend was a Korean speaker. So even though the Korean speaker didn't speak English very well and my grandmother didn't speak Korean, they somehow connected and became really good friends. So I got the opportunity to go to Korea in winter of 2015 to present a paper at a computer science research conference, and it happened to be in Busan, which is where the Korean grocer was from. And so my grandmother mentioned it, and she was ecstatic. And so when I came back home, despite the fact that I had spoken to her many times and bought vegetables pretty much all my life, when I spoke to her in Korean, she like saw me with completely new eyes, and our connection was so much deeper than before. And so I remember walking back home with my grandmother, and she turns to me and she says, I've never been more proud of you than in that moment. And I was like, wow, I'm going to keep learning Korean now. The second moment was about a year later. Once again, involving my family, I went to visit my dad at his job, and he had a coworker named Yena Kwan. And I'd heard so much about Yena. She was a new attorney. She was really witty, really smart, really fun, and I really wanted her to like me. And I remember my dad had left to get some water, and when he came back, before he came back, Yana turns to me and says, so, your dad tells me that you're studying Korean. Introduce yourself. And so now I had so much pressure because Yana was so cool. I really wanted to impress her. And so after I did, she was like, oh, okay, you're exactly what I thought you would be. And I had no idea what that meant. I was like, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Later on, apparently she told my dad that she was incredibly impressed, and he had already given her like this high expectation of what to expect when I walked in, and apparently I had exceeded it. And so of course now I'm ecstatic. I'm like, okay, of course I'm going to continue learning Korean. And the thing is that learning Korean is actually pretty difficult. For those of you who have learned a language where the object comes before the verb, you know exactly what I'm talking about here. It's just a complete different change in the way you think about formulating a sentence. Additionally, there's a lot of different levels in the language. And so when I would practice with friends, it was completely different to the way that I would speak in my business Korean class, which I'm taking now. And so definitely taking the time to articulate a sentence always kind of worked on my confidence in the language. But whenever I got that feedback, whether from my family or from other Korean speakers, I realized how important it was for me to keep going and keep pushing through. So after graduation, I'm going to be working for a technical consulting firm because I'm CS, but it has different locations around the world, and I'm looking forward to being able to connect with people in either Mandarin, Chinese, or Korean. And I really encourage people to continue learning languages, even though it's very difficult. And as many of the other presenters have said before, it's a really rewarding experience to be able to connect not just with the people who speak the language, but seeing people who maybe don't expect when looking at you to speak a language, connecting with another person. It really encourages them to maybe look beyond maybe someone's cultural background or what language they speak and take that step and say, I'm going to learn more about you. So thank you.